Hey, welcome to the first layer. It is Sunday. I hope everybody is having what?
That was like the perfect sound fade out. Like,
yeah.
I was thinking that too, Brian. I was thinking that too. So that's the perfect fade.
Now that everybody cut me off of my intro, let's try that again. Hey, welcome to the first layer. My name's Richard. A happy Sunday to everybody. That guy over there, that's Brian. And the lovely
hello,
lady
everybody.
That is just a disembodied voice is my lovely wife, Jerry. She is on the chat. She's going to be sending us chat messages through the screen today and answering your questions. And that's what we do on Ask for Help every Sunday afternoon at 12 o'clock. We've had a very busy week, so those people that have been waiting for me to call them back this week, I have had a nightmare of a week. So hopefully in this upcoming week, I'll be able to get to some stuff. This afternoon, I am totally booked again. So let's dive in real quick. Brian, what have you been printing this week?
Mostly Voron parts for my big machine. Now, admittedly, I'm breaking all the rules with this project. Now, we just found out like minutes before the show, and by we I mean Richard rubbed it in my face, that I bought the gears for the Voron 2.1, not for the 2.4. So I'm gonna have to print the bigger gears that go around the 40 mil to make that work. So yeah, I'm having that kind of day. You know, maybe I'll even try to make it run on a 40 and just do something different. I don't know. You know my machine. It's going to be a Frankenstein of parts, if you will. But yeah, I've been working on that. Actually, I had a very interesting week because I finally got a hold of the We2 source code for the X40, and I have been diligently working hard to port it to Marlin 2.0.8.2. And oh my gosh, has that been a nightmare, guys, I'll tell you. But once it's all done, you know, that machine will be a better quality machine. And then for the CR10 beside me here, I can probably go ahead and give you a little screen capture. We are back to trying Clipper again. So as you can see, I've got some oscillations on my bed to work out, but I want to give this a whole decent in and out trial again before we start going and give you guys tutorials, because there's a lot to it and it takes a lot to get it dialed in. But when you do, it is a fantastic, fantastic firmware. How about you, Richard?
Well, I've been busy. I've been printing Voron parts for a client now. And of course, one of the heads on my Flash Forge decided to finally crap out on me again. And that's for the accent color. So now I got to put a new nozzle in there. I think what I'm going to end up doing with that one Flash Forge is I'm going to end up taking out the guts of the throat and the hot end and just insert an all metal. So there would be no more PTFE lined throats. There would be none of that garbage. And then it'll just flow the way it should flow. But I have a bit of a show and tell today before we get started with questions. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to cut to, where's my mouse? There it is. I'm going to cut to this overhead. And in this box, I bought these quite a while ago before I started building the frame of the Voron. But these are 90-degree angles. I bought these on Amazon. And you can buy them in different packs. You can get 4, 8, 12, depending on the ones that you're looking for. What these are and why are these good? You're asking yourself. Well, they're great for doing several things like squaring up your frame. Now, I've measured these on a good angle, and they are truly 90 degrees. So they're very cheap. I think these were like $22 on Amazon Canadian, if I remember right. But they're really good to have around when you're building your printers. If you get a printer that is, let's say, Creality CR-10, and you have to put on some parts, or you want to make sure that you've got a level gantry, well, you can do that by just laying this on the print surface or on the other part of your frame, and then bringing down your gantry and resting it on the top. Really good product for a very inexpensive price. They're great to have around. So they make putting together frames very, very easy. And you can clamp them in place. So that's even better. So this is one of the things that I would recommend people have in their arsenal of tools if they're doing a lot of printer builds. I know we do a lot of printer builds. DeWitt's been doing a lot of printer builds. But these have just made life so easy for me, especially when I went to do the Voron frame, because these just made sure that my frame was totally square all the way through the build process. So it's something that you guys should seriously think about looking at, and I'm just going to box them up. And they are called, they're House Solution 90-degree positioning squares. So that's what they are. So it's House Solutions, and they are 90-degree positioning squares. You can find them on Amazon. That's where I got these ones, and I think they're a great little product. So there's my show and tell for today.
Yeah, not much for me to show and tell over here, apart from, box of Voron parts, weird things like little belts that, you just can't source at most places around here. It's been a bit of a challenging project for us, and that's why we had to take a little bit of time before part 2 here. But Do you have now? Which board are you going with again on this Voron build? You got the.
I actually went back a little bit, and I'm doing the 1.3s because I happen to have two of them in my storage of parts. Two brand new ones, as a matter of fact. So I'm using the 1.3s, and I'm using 2208 steppers as opposed to 2209 steppers because that's what I had on hand. I wanted to cut down the amount of stuff I had to order.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then wait. And that seems to be the big problem with Voron printers these days, is that if you're sourcing your own products, like I did, it can take a long time for you to get what you need. Now, still what I need, and I wrote it down in my little black book here. I'm going to tell you guys that they're on order, but I'm just waiting for them to show up. I am waiting for my sensor, which goes on the gantry, and that's for mesh bed leveling. That is not for actually leveling the bed, because the bed doesn't go anywhere. It's for mesh bed leveling only. There is an end stop that the nozzle of your hot end will actually touch to actually get that end stop. I'm also waiting on my silicone heater pad, which is expected by July 6th at the latest. My temperature fuse for that silicone bed, which will be here by the latest, June 15th, they say, and my DIN rail mount for my SSR, and that looks like it's expected by July 26th. So
yeah, everything is terrible right now. Even in my day-to-day career, guys, we are trying to order breakers right now that are being told that they're going to deliver in fourth quarter, which is normally a 2-week turnaround thing, and now it's end of the year. So we're in this with you in getting all the parts. Now, that being said, you can buy ready-to-go kits from China, and we were just looking into that the other day. For about 1,200 Canadian, you can get everything except for the 3D printed parts. For the 350 by 350 build on AliExpress, and we don't have any preference for sellers. We just say go in there, make sure you understand the shipping field, which courier they'll ship it, what import duties there'll be. But sometimes if you just want a plain Jane kit, this is the best way to go. But that being said, it's also quite a bit more expensive because we're doing a couple commissions ourselves here to print out the 3D printed parts here in Calgary. So if you're looking for a kit of 3D printed parts, just get us in touch with us here. We'll get that rolling. But otherwise, there's not a lot of places to buy the printed parts. That's what kind of caught me off guard. So we're using, and you don't know what quality ABS they're using and all that. Because remember, at the end of the day, the 3D printed parts, if you go cheap, and I'm kind of being an oxymoron here right now, okay? Because being that my machine's going to be an experimental machine, I'm actually printing them all out of Matter 3D PLA because I want to see how it holds up. And then if I start having issues, I'm going to switch it all over to Matter 3D ABS and see what the difference is. But I'm curious because if you've seen my previous demonstrations, that PLA is stronger than your average product on the market. So I want to see how that works out here.
Yeah, there's like you were saying, there's several kits out there. There's the FormBot kit, which you can get off of Amazon or off of AliExpress. There is another one, Blue Dot or Blue something or other, that you can get a kit from as well. Now, bear in mind that when you're buying these kits, not all the parts in there are spec to the bill of materials, and they've done their best to do what they do to offer you a kit, as it were. And I know that Thomas Sandlander just recently got his kit and his parts and so on, and he's been doing live builds for the last week. He's got 2 or 3 episodes out now.
Something like that, and they're 3-hour bursts. So there's a lot of work to go into building it.
There is. This is not a build it in a half an hour like an Ender 3. This is not build it in a couple hours or a few hours like a Prusa Mark 3S.
This is kind of like buying a Lego kit.
Well, it's like buying a deck for your house that all comes in pieces. None of it's been pre-assembled. So like you have to, of course, drill through, and you've got to tap everything. you've got to prep all your parts. So a good thing with some of these kits, though, is that they already have done that work for you, but you don't know how accurate they are. So Thomas got away pretty good with the kit that he got, so that was awesome. He's also putting in duet boards, which you can do that. Duet boards are very expensive. So the cheaper alternative is the SKR boards.
What you guys got to understand is with shipping, whenever you deal with any kind of website, this goes back to like the earliest days of eBay. Sometimes sellers will hit a low price in there so that they get higher up on the metrics list, but it gets offset by the shipping costs.
Yeah.
There's
Anne says that just build an Ender 3v2 was not a half an hour. But again, I checked everything 2 or 3 times. And now you can put together an Ender 3.5 an hour. I've done it in 20 minutes. And because
she's saying she checked everything 3 times over, which you should, yeah. Take the hour, take your time and
take your time, check everything twice, measure twice, cut once, as they say, and that goes the same for putting together your 3D printers. Measure, square, and make sure everything is right before you continue on to the next stage. Let's get into some questions. I've got one here from Rex Waldy. It says, what causes TMC connection error message, and how do you resolve this? Brian, you're the TMC expert, so I'm going to pass this one off to you.
Yeah, I guess the biggest question is what changed from when it was working. We kind of spoke a bit about this last week there, but a TMC connection error means that the serial pins on your Trinamic driver are not linking up properly to your main board. And it's simply put, not just fix this, fix this, fix this. There's a combination of, did you change your motherboard? And if so, does your motherboard require a different serial definition for communicating with the UART on these chips? Was there any wiring changes? Are these pins, all 3 of them that are protruding up on the top of this guy, are they properly connecting down through your main board? The best thing you can do, honestly, is enable the TMC debug feature in Marlin if your firmware has enough memory room. Now that command, when you issue, I believe it's M911, I could be wrong there, but it gives you a diagnostic output of all of your steppers, and it'll tell you which stepper is not communicating properly. Generally what we'll see is there's a device ID, and if it comes through as all zeros, then you might have a wire shorted to ground. If it's coming through as all Fs, then it means you have a floating wire. So yes, please go into your firmware and enable TMC_debug, and hopefully you have enough memory on your microcontroller to handle it. And then if you issue the TMC diagnostics information through Marlin, through say Pronterface or any of your serial commands, it'll output a big old list. And if you see something that says like all low or all high at the bottom, it helps you identify which stepper is having the issue. And then, just try reseating it. Sometimes that just fixes it.
I want to move over to this page now that we're talking about G-codes for a second. And I want to show you guys this page. If you're unfamiliar with what G-code and M-codes are, this is a great website. It's called CNC Cookbook, and it is cnccookbook.com. And you can go ahead and check out their G and their M codes. Now, the G and M codes in these are exactly the same as you're going to use in a 3D printer, because essentially a 3D printer is a CNC machine. In its most rudimentary design, it is a CNC machine. So all the M codes and G codes that you're going to need are all located right here, and you can find out exactly what they do. So I want you guys to go and bookmark this page called CNC Cookbook. It's cnccookbook.com. I'm going to grab the URL right here. You can see, and I'm going to put it in the chat. Copy that, and we'll put that right in the chat for you guys. I would bookmark this and make sure that everybody puts that into their bookmarks. And if you need to refer back to G-codes, this is a great place to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, if you ever wonder what does CNC actually mean, CNC is computerized numeric control. And all these codes we're talking about, these G and M codes, are numerical control codes that have been used in mills and automation systems for well over 50 years. So Marlin basically takes that base code set and attempts to abide by the CNC practices, as they had the most commands that were basically standardized, if you will. So when you're going through your G code, you're going to see a lot of G1s, which is a linear move. You might, if you have arc welder, you might have like G2 or 3. And then there's a lot more M codes and everything that are outside the CNC space. And that's where you start seeing the 3D printer specific ones. And then when you go further in, you know, the more OEM things like M900s and so forth. Going down to the core of G code, at the end of the day, this is why Marlin has a flavor of G code, why RepRap has a flavor, because as they evolved, there was no standard defined early on what the 3D printer related CNC codes, if you will, would be. And so that's why you got to make sure, if you're running RepRap or you're running Marlin, make sure you set that up in your slicer, or you might get weird results. Chances are everything you have runs Marlin, and the RepRap stuff you'd be working with is not using more customized stuff. But a good example is Clipper. If you open up Clipper's definitions, it only has about 16 or 17 G-code definitions, because that's all it needs. Everything else is custom commands that would not respond to a Marlin machine. So just a heads up on that.
All right, let's get into the first question. Jerry, have you got one for us? Okay. This comes from Mr. Darkhawk 1972. He says, I'll be installing Octopi, and I've been reading that certain micro USB cables won't relay a signal between the Ender 3V2 and the Pi 4. What should I be looking for in a cable when purchasing? I think for the most part, you need to be looking for a cable that has all of the data connection, because what can happen is if you grab the wrong cable. And here's a great example. This cable right here, it looks like, oh, there we go. This cable right here is for my phone. Could I transfer data over this? No, because this is just a recharging cord. So it only has the power and one data line so the phone recognizes when it's charged. That's all that's on there. Now, if you were to get this cable fully populated, it'll be a little fatter cable. It should have a ferrule around it, or a ferrite block around it. I think they're called ferrite blocks.
Yeah, for interference protection.
For interference, those are proper data cable. So something to be aware of.
Cables wise, I've had a few discussions with friends about this week, and it comes down to the quality of the cable. I would prefer it if people sourced a more industrial USB cable that had a thicker conductor, better shielding, because it's not going to be moving around a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and bring, see if I can bring my Octoprint instance back up here again. And I just want to show you guys here. Of course, it's going to come through terrible, so I'm going to try and scale it up for you. Hang on a second here. Let's trade back to me. Do a little scaling. High quality stuff here. Okay, so hopefully this can come through clear. If you see right now, as my machine is printing, this resend ratio is 0 out of 23.9 thousand messages, 0%. So whenever you're running Octoprint and you're sending data over USB, it actually goes and asks, how often do I need to resend the data? So it gives you an idea of how good the data integrity is between your printer and your Raspberry Pi. So we can see here that I've got a perfect communication. I've never had to resend a message, which is a really good thing to see. If you're starting to see that resend ratio, even a couple points, that's usually a cause for concern. It means either your printer is trying to accept more commands than you can send, or that you're having data communication issues across the serial connection there. So at the end of the day, I want you to buy a good quality USB cable for your machine. And if you start using the cheap stuff, admittedly right now I'm actually using the cheap CR-10 little USB-B cable, because it's only a few inches long, and then I threw it through a USB extension cord. So I wanted to show you guys that even with a probably about 6 to 10 foot USB extension cord going to the Pi, I've had no data integrity loss. So it's not a matter of data length. It's not a matter of, even surrounding noise sometimes. It's just make sure you have a good quality cable and a good quality connection, that you're not bending the USB pins on either side. If you can, I'd recommend get some of those little sticky zip tie mounts and zip ties from your favorite little hardware store there, and just tie that USB cable up around the connector area so that it can't move. So if you pull the cable or you wiggle it, so it doesn't pull or wiggle on the connector, because I've seen a lot of broken connectors out there too. So hopefully that'll help you guys just with a better quality connection to your printer. You got to remember, especially with Raspberry Pis, that connection is more critical than any other feature in your print system. So spend the time, spend a little more money. Don't go to like Best Buy and buy the Rocketfish USB cable or even the Monster cable. Go and see if you have an electronics supplier domestically that sells something for like a control system that's rated for a panel. And Richard, I think you were doing a keystone for a port on your case, weren't you?
Yes, I printed off the optional backplane, which I'm not using the first recommended plugin. I'm using the other one, which is an all-in-one plug-in switch and fuse. Now, this allows me to have two keystones, one on either side. I'm using one keystone as a network input, so that I don't when I've got all these things together, I can network them together, and I can dedicate one printer to all of the networked printers, and it will control all of the printing tasks that it needs to do.
Yeah, it's once you get past that USB connection issue there, basically Octoprint is a fantastic option. I'm just going to reach around here because I know I had it right on the floor here. I was talking with my friend James the other night, who was having issues with his Creality machine with it disconnecting. And simply put, if you have a serial port on your machine that you can connect to, you can potentially go to something like this. This is just a little USB to serial adapter with some breakout wires, and you can connect these straight onto one of your printer's serial port headers instead of using the onboard USB serial. So this might be an option too if you're looking at a really micro-sized design where you don't want to run a bunch of cables, because all you need is a transmit, a receive, and a ground.
All right, let's get into the next question, Jerry. Okay, I find that I get that error a lot if I have a Pi hooked up and powered, and it is powering the board and the main power switch is not on. Disconnecting the USB and the power fixes that. That's from DB3D Dan. Yes, if you are using a cable to your Raspberry Pi from another source, whether it be from your computer or whatever, because you're doing some work, understand that this, whenever you connect this to a printer from a computer, this is going to supply 5 volts to that bed or to that controller. Yes, it's going to give you some power to power the screen and do some command work on the board, but it's not going to power your motors or your hot end or any of that. There's just not enough power to do that.
Now, that being said, almost all the new motherboards, at least the good quality ones that I've been buying, such as the SKR Pro, have a jumper so you can determine if the 5 volt for your printer is going to come from its onboard 5 volt regulator or from the USB. And if you check in your motherboard has that, you don't need to buy any of these special cables like the one TH3D makes that doesn't have the power bus. It's just an adaptation built into the board. It costs them nothing to add. So check your board before you start worrying about isolating the power out. But indeed, if you do have one that you can't isolate it out, you want to make sure to unplug that USB when powering off the machine, or you're still keeping the 5 volt circuits active through the USB.
All right, we've got an email here from Danny Howard. He says, I have an Ender 3 Pro with a 4.2.2 motherboard. I've added a BL Touch. I was having issues with the stock hot end. The Bowden tube would always get filament stuck between the tube and the nozzle. I installed a V3 Volcano hot end, and now it will not print. It looks like poop. Always clumpy and lumpy after the first 2 layers of the raft. I've tried different temps and flows and height. I just can't get it. I only installed the stock fan, so maybe I need more air. It has nothing to do with air. It has everything to do with how much filament you're trying to push through that volcano. You may be pushing too much. Go ahead.
I wonder if, because going to an all-metal hot end like that, too, you need to make sure to drop your retraction way down.
Yep,
it will guaranteed. If you leave your retraction, you go to an all-metal hot end, you drop your retraction down to, let's say you keep it in the 6.5, it's going to clog, okay? It's not even an option. I'm going to tell you guys, it's going to clog eventually, and it's because you're trying to pull a lot of hot filament back into your heating area. And even though the fins are all cooled, there still is a time it takes for that heat to transient out from the tube and into those heat sinks to cool down. And generally what happens with PLA is it likes to swell. Now, we've seen all these people that condition their hot ends, put oil and all that. It's kind of a mitigation technique, and I think there was even one guy who sprayed PTFE down the tube, which, yes, it'll work, but it also completely defeats the point of having an all-metal hot end. Now, a good way to check that, to see if you're sticking against it, is switch to something like PETG that just does not stick to metal. If you run that through there and it's running perfectly fine, then chances are you've got a heat swelling issue on there. So just, check your fans. There's just so many reasons a block can get all clogged up, to be honest. And even if you've cleared it, there's a chance you may still have particles in there that you didn't clear out when you heat it up. So what I've done recently, unfortunately, it's kind of at a weird angle to show here, but with my CR-10, I ended up taking everything off the carriage except for just the heater block and its heat sink, and I just heat it up and I leave it there for about 3 to 4 hours. I am present in the room if there's any problems, but basically the heat will radiate up all through the tube enough that it can go and at least soften up anything that cooled and bound inside that tube assembly. And then you can do your cold pulls, whatever you need to, get it all flushed out clean, let it air cool down naturally, and then only once it's reached room temperature again do you want to reassemble it just to make sure it's all clean. Also, on one of our Tuesday Chips a few weeks ago, we went over torching a nozzle, how to do that too. So if you're a member there, you can go ahead and check out that video, and that is my go-to method when I am at wit's end. The caveat is it really is best for all metal hot ends. I don't recommend doing it for the Bowden ones because you have to pull the tube out. Otherwise, you are going to melt that liner and poison yourself with the gases that come off.
So we've got one here from Henry Stofferin. He says, I thought I had on Saturday with many of us who have more than one printer, a database of members with some of the similar printers or number of such. The growing need for help or those who could help others would be, as I see it, a asset. I think that's a great idea, actually. As my printers grow, I have had questions that I feel did not get answered. I have plans for my printers, and time down leaves me at a loss and frustrated. We all have that problem. We all suffer from that.
So Henry, I've reached out to you here. We'll get that sorted out for sure. That issue. It's just I won't lie to you guys. We don't like to talk about personal issues here on the channel much, but we had a lot of challenges this month that.
Last month and this month
that almost kind of took us out of commission permanently. So we are trying to bounce a bit back from that. I mean, we like to be transparent, but we don't want this to become a give-a-thon. So we're just getting everything restructured. The past week I have been driving. My daily commute has been about 120 miles each way every day. So it's been a little tiring, and my WeDo machine, which I need for work-related stuff, unfortunately, they are a great example of a company that hasn't handled their customer service well because they're too small. And we spoke a bit about this last week with companies that there is a huge disconnect right now. Like if you are having a problem with your printer, you have to go to the community because there's simply no corporate support unless you're willing to buy a Prusa. And that's something we're trying to change the image of and get that rolling here. But that being said, unfortunately, our personal issues came in the way of delivering you guys the regular stuff. That's why we just noticed this morning that we have not published a video in fact, I think a month to the day.
A month.
So,
yeah.
So yes, there is some content coming here, guys. Right now, as I mentioned with the Clipper install here, I want to do a really in-detailed one for you guys because there is a lot to consume for it, especially if you have things like BL touches. It almost needs to be a series in itself. However, if you have a stock machine out there right now, for instance, like a CR-10S or an Ender 3 that you'd like to move over to Clipper, it's extremely easy. It only gets complex when you start adding all this stuff in. So please stay tuned. In fact, I might even do a live stream if we can't get a video together here. And I'll be sure to schedule that about 24 hours in advance so you guys know you can come join me here.
Yeah, I think that, it has been challenging over the last month. We've had a lot of things going on. I had to decide whether I was renewing my lease or not. And there was a lot of things going on here. And just things that have to be taken care of in our everyday lives that unfortunately get pushed forward and everything else gets pushed back. I'm still, like I said at the top of the show, I'm still waiting on parts for the Voron so I can finish that up. I would have liked to have continued that series on the Voron, but we had corrupted footage. We had footage that had no audio. It was just a nightmare. And I think a lot of that has to do with my attention span not being there for what had to be done in terms of the shows going forward. So now that a lot of that is starting to settle down and some changes are being made and they're being implemented, I think that we'll be able to move forward with our regular scheduled Tuesday tips. Now, we're not always going to have a Tuesday tip for our members, but we do try and give you as many tips as we can. Some of those come in the form of our long format episodes. So I've got an episode coming up on this board from Aster. This board here is going into the Ender 3. This is a replacement board for the Ender 3. You can see I haven't even taken it out of the package. But the problem with this is there's no online documentation for it. There is no firmware for it because the firmware has already been put on the board. So I have no idea how it's been configured. So when we get to that point of installing it into the machine, it's going to be basically take the old one out, put the new one in. Let's see how it works because there's nothing else to do to it. Now, it does have Wi-Fi module on it. There's no instruction manual for this board. There's no idea of how this is all going to work. So we're going to try and bring that to you as best we can. And do I think that board is any better than the SKR board? At this stage of the game, no. Because in my Ender 3, I have an SKR E3 Mini, I believe. And that seems to be working fine. And I also on that one, I have a Raspberry Pi in it to control that, but I haven't completely hooked it up. So I'm thinking I may end up doing Clipper on that Raspberry Pi through Octoprint, and we'll see how that goes.
So I just wanted to take a second here because, Richard mentioning about the firmware, this is something that has been really, really, quite frankly, guys, pissing me off, okay? And that is the lack of GPL compliance when it comes to OEMs. Now, we saw this first with Creality back when the CR-10S came out, and thank you to Naomi Wu for pushing them and getting that source code out there. But for those of you who don't know, the GPU is the GNU is basically a licensing system that's a pre-written contract to cover most bases depending on how you want your distribution to go. So now the Marlin GNU license basically states you are free to use this product and you are free to make money off this product. However, if you use it within your own company for your own personal uses, you are not required to source the original and provide the source code and so forth. But if you are providing a product to an end consumer that is executing that code, you are required under this license to release the source code in its entirety under the same license as where it came from. So in this case, if you are taking Marlin, you have to fork it and you have to put it out there. And truth be told, I don't understand what this hesitation is with OEMs releasing this stuff, because we do. I did manage, actually, unfortunately, I requested and the CEO said they were going to give me the source code. I ended up getting it through a community member faster than through WeDo. And the only thing they were willing to grant me was an invitation in there to edit the code privately, if you will. So if I took that and forked it out and displayed it publicly, I might have been getting ripped from them for that, which would be unjust entirely. But anyways, I got this source code. I'm working through it. But this is not the first company we've come across that's done this.
No.
And it's really becoming a headache. I mean, I've alone spent probably 10 hours of programming just to decrypt how they wrapped their way around the source code just to get it to boot. I can't even get their LCD to work quite yet. But I've been able to make a few more strides than anyone else has yet on this machine. And yet the processor is a standard processor that most OEMs use. And this is something to the 3D printer manufacturers. Stop reinventing the wheel with motherboards. You know, if there's a public design out there that you want to go and fork and make it something where every IO pin is, put out there, yes, please do that. But like the WeDo one, there's so much random customization on their board. And because they're not releasing the schematic to me, I have to go and meter out every single pin and wire and figure out what component goes through what. It's a waste of my time, frankly. This is just something that really gets under my skin. OEMs, abide by the darn licenses and don't try to reinvent the wheel with your printer. Just try to make something that prints really nicely.
All right, let's move on to our next question. This one comes from Craig Duncan. He says, I just got an Ender 3 Pro. It's my first. Are the fan shrouds that direct the airflow away from the tip worth printing? And I noticed most, if not all, suggest ABS or PETG. What will PLA do? PLA will melt if you are doing a fan shroud. Speak English, Mr. Cleveland, because it has such a low melting temperature. So you do want to print them out of either ABS or PETG. And at the end of the day, because this is an Ender 3 Pro, I would print it out of PETG. But here's what I found. Most Ender 3 stock setups work perfectly fine. You do not have to make another fan duct. You do not have to do one that's all the way around it like a lot of people suggest you do. I know from my own experience,
nice,
5 years now doing 3D printing, I've learned a lot, and I try and pass that on to you guys. So by going out and doing all these fancy upgrades, it's not necessary. At the end of the day, it really is not necessary. Some are good enhancements, but they're not necessary to do. If this is your first printer, don't print anything as upgrades. Right now, I want you just to print stuff. I don't care what you print, just print stuff. Get used to how the mechanics work on the 3D printer. Get used to how the airflow works. If you feel that it's not doing the job that you need it to do, then look at an alternative or ask us and we'll give you an alternative to that. But right now, I would suggest that you just play with the printer for the next few months, run through a couple of rolls of filament, print whatever you want, and then go nuts. Here's a good example. Let me grab this.
And that was the last we saw of Richard.
No, I'm right here. Let me pull that off. This is my Ender 3. Okay? This is the last Ender 3 I have left. I'm going to go to full screen here. You guys can see this better. Hang on. There we go.
Nope.
Cut to that. All right. So, what have I done to this? Well, I have a camera on there. You can see that I put some ducting on and I put some drawers in. I put on a BL Touch. This has the original hot end still on it. I upgraded the, what do you call it there? The extruder assembly. But at the end of the day, most of this is cosmetic. It's really not structural. It doesn't help me. The BL Touch certainly helps because of the bed. The camera helps because of Octoprint, and although I haven't set up Octoprint on this yet, this was for a future upgrade. But the camera is there so that I can monitor it through Octoprint. And in all honesty, I think this machine, since I bought it, has been the best working machine I've ever had. And I've done really nothing to it.
Until I get it, and then it will break.
Until I give it to my wife, and then it will break. Yes, correct. All right, let's go back here. There we go.
The Ender 3 Pro, I'm not going to lie to you, is almost the perfect printer.
It is.
Almost in the caveat that I wish they had shipped with it with an all-metal heat break. That would have been kind of nice. But I do have an Ender 3 downstairs that is still using the original Bowden tube hot end, and it works perfectly fine because I print PLA on it. And, you know, I know everyone's like, I want to print all the materials in the world. Do you really? I mean, you know, ABS, it stinks. PETG is fun, but it has its own quirks that you have to redial all your slicer for.
Yep.
You know, if all you're doing is printing PLA, you don't need the all-metal hot end. It just makes it better. And, you know, as long as you keep it away from about 240 Celsius. That's my only real caveat there. But yeah, that machine out of the box is almost the perfect printer.
All right, we got a little under 20 minutes. We're going to take questions from the chat tonight, or this afternoon. What do we got here? From the Seneca. Have you had a fan wire blew on the CR-10S Pro blower fan break off? The part soldered inside the fan housing. Yes, I have. Can you take, or can the fan be taken apart? No, it can't.
Actually, it can caveat. Now, I really apologize, guys. My camera is garbage here, so this is not going to help you much. But I got a fan right here in front of me, just a standard. This thing came out of a server cabinet. Okay, this blows like an MFer, as they say sometimes. But if you peel the stickers off, and I'm going to try and peel this all the way off. There we go. Take a look under the fan. And you'll see that little green circuit board there. That is where you would need to solder those wires back onto. Now, if you ever need to disassemble a fan, you have to go and take off this little locking metal piece there, and then the whole fan, if you will, pops right off the front. But I won't lie to you, it's not worth your time. It requires a lot of effort. Even getting in here with a soldering iron is not a fun thing to do, okay? You have to have a very steady hand and all that and fix it. If your choice is fixing this or waiting 6 weeks for a new fan, then go for it, because your fan is down already. Yeah. But if, really, which machine were we talking about here?
Ender, I believe.
Ender?
Or CR-10.
Yeah, so
CR-10.
CR-10. So that's a 12-volt fan.
Yep.
You can order yourself any
on the
kind
Pro, it's not. On the Pro, it's 24.
On the Pro, is it 24? Okay, they moved to 24. You can get cheap 24-volt fans for penny, well, really like $7, $8. If you want to go for a brand name thing like Sunon, you can get it for about 10 to 15. There's plenty of options to order out there. Now, I was going to find a way to kind of kibosh this into today's discussion, but one of the things I bought this week was a little Arctic fan. And you might notice here, one thing that might throw you off is that it's PWM. Now, these are used on computers where you send...
Richard kicked the plug again. No, Richard didn't kick the plug again. Looks like we are experiencing some issues here.
Oh, we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see there. Yeah.
I don't know if our stream is having the same issue, but
yeah. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Now we're back.
Yeah, it's kind of flipping in and out there.
I've got excellent connection, so it must be on their end.
We also just have a big rainstorm / thunderstorm rolling in here, guys. So hopefully throughout this season we don't get cut off mid-show, but it's entirely possible. That's why I threw the question out this week of if you have your printer on a surge protector or on a UPS, because every year we get questions about printers blowing up or losing your prints mid-job and all that because of lightning. And for about $100, you can get a UPS that'll tie you through those little surges.
All right, let's get to this question from Robert954. He says, when gluing parts together, what is a good glue to use on PLA? You can use super glue. That's certainly one. The other one is, it is a methyl hydrate glue, I believe is what it is. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Let me just.
I know there was
in a blue tube.
In a blue tube. Yeah, Weld-On.
Weld-On. That's. I was looking up JB Weld or whatever, but yeah, it was some kind of plastic welding material. Yeah. I unfortunately don't have any of that stuff.
Also works very good on your finger.
Let's see here. Yeah, I'm not sure the exact, like basically any kind of adhesive that works for plastics. See, Weld-On is a solvent cement, so it'll actually soften up the plastic and weld it together. So you got to be careful when you weld those parts together. But for, let me just see here what we got from them. They've got, Weld-On has a boatload of products. So you look at something, they got an ABS cement.
It's a blue tube, I know that.
It also works really good when you break the fridge cupboard thing that holds on the door. It fixes it really good.
Oh, that's good. Blue Seal? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's a blue seal.
Yeah, pipe thread sealant. No. Okay, sorry. So there's a lot of products on this, guys. We'll have to get back to you on which exact one it is.
I used to have a tube of it right here on my table, but I think my wife stole it.
Uh-oh.
Oh, she says it's upstairs. So.
Okay. Yeah, any kind of product like that will help. DeWitt 3D saying super glue with a spray activator works excellent. Yes, I can't remember the brand, but you can buy it at Canadian Tire. It's got an aerosol can and then a little bottle of super glue. And super glue, you can activate it with all sorts of different things. I've found that it activates really well with water. So often when I'm using like an over-the-counter super glue, I'll glue something and then I'll proceed to breathe on it, and the hot, humid breath will help it cure, at least on the surface layer, faster, so you can go in and put it aside and let it long-term cure.
Or it's dying from halitosis.
Yeah, that too. Oh my goodness. And then Mike Vargas saying 3D pen with PLA. Yeah, you know, they kind of came in a drove and then vanished on the market. You can use it for a little bit.
I disagree. Remember Jess's dragon that she gave me to fix, and she did that with the PLA pen?
Well,
I hated that. That was disgusting.
No, the PLA pens, I mean, anytime you're adding material, it's a good thing, right? So if you have a hole to fill, they are pretty darn good for that. But
not
you know, I've
for
also
gluing
seen
together.
No, not for gluing together. I've seen a couple things lately for those little metal apparatuses you can get where you can heat up the metal and then push it right into the plastic to weld it together. And then, you know, if all else fails at the end of the day and you just want to screw it together, you can always use these little knurled nuts here, the little heat pressed nuts. And these are used a lot in the Voron builds. So Rachel and I will be showing you guys how to insert those with a soldering iron. And because it melts the plastic around it and swells around it, and it's designed that it threads both directions, there's more likely a chance of the plastic cracking before this thing slides out.
All right, I found it, so I'm going to just cut over to it so you guys can see exactly what we're doing here. It's called Weld-On 16, and this stuff will melt ABS, or pardon me, PLA together, just like, you know, styrene cement glue will do that for models. This is the stuff that I use. This I prefer over any other glue for PLA because it welds it together. It doesn't just stick it together. It literally melts the plastic together, much like styrene plastic using styrene glue and ABS using a thinner of sorts.
Little goes a long way. And don't.
Yeah, little goes a long way on this stuff. Jerry's absolutely right about that. All right, so hey guys, this is from Snapshot FPV. Says, got me a new redheaded stepchild, a CR-10 V2. Any recommendations? Straight away, I put all metal hot end and a BL touch. All is working well. If everything's working well, don't mess with it. Leave it alone. Exactly.
Just maybe get some lubricant. Make sure those rods are lubricated.
Yeah.
Because the stuff they ship with from the factory is not great.
And you can do that. You can lubricate that stuff with either some white lithium grease or some PTFE grease. If you're going to use PTFE grease though on your linear rods, what I would do is make sure that they are completely cleaned off of any old grease, any dust, anything that might be on them. Make sure that you clean all of that off first, and then just lightly apply some PTFE. If you start at the top, it'll work its way down, and then just run your gantry up and down a few times to work it in, and you should be fine.
Peter Reynolds asking, what's its dry time? Are you referring to the PTFE lube or the glue? In general, for most
glue dries right away.
It usually dries instantaneously, but I always say wait 24 hours before doing an impact test on anything.
Yeah.
You know, it'll cure on the surface, but a lot of these adhesives rely on oxygen to activate and to start curing. And once you've sealed off that top layer and it's cured, you've now got a basin underneath that has to slowly pull oxygen through the surface layer to basically dry out. So even though it appears dry, it might be dry to the touch, where that will be fine for painting. The actual structural integrity of the joint might not be completed for about 24 hours. So just take your time, guys. If you end up getting a product, if you go to the hobby shops, they also have glues that have different working times. So some super glues are instantaneous. Other super glues can have 45 minutes of working time. So just read into it. It really is per product.
Of course, I'm looking for stuff on my desk as we're talking and making all kinds of noise. The Mega Whatever, he says, hello, I'm working on adding a Pet's Fang to my Ender 3 V2 and changing the hot end to an E3D V6. How important is it that I replace the thermistor and heater cartridge versus original?
Good
if
question.
You're using a genuine E3D V6, use their heater cartridge and their thermistor cartridge because they're different from the ones that are already on your V2. Now, that being said, do I think it's a necessary upgrade to do that? No. I think that you can get away a lot cheaper and a lot less headache by just adding parts to your existing hot end or changing it over to a micro Swiss, to be perfectly honest with you. You can buy all metal throats now. Buy yourself, or a titanium all metal throat. You can get yourself a copper plated block and then just get yourself a high quality nozzle. And that's going to last you a long, long time.
Even just getting a new nozzle for that thing is a pretty good investment without replacing your whole heat block. I mean, again, unless you are printing ABS, PETG, nylon, all these higher temp materials, you're perfectly fine to stick with the stock hot end on the Ender 3 or on the CR-10. It's just a matter, like, the nozzle is always the cheapest thing. So for those of you who don't know, brass is a very soft metal. It's used so that you can beat it up and it won't really damage your machine or the kinematics or anything like that. But with it being soft, anything abrasive going through that hot end will etch away at it much quicker. Brass is also highly conductive for heat, which works really well too. But if you just go and buy yourself a stainless steel or a hardened steel nozzle, you might have to boost your temperatures 5 to 10 degrees. However, that nozzle will probably outlast your machine if you take care of it and don't take a metal grinder to it, if you will.
Yeah, we've got time for one more question, 4 minutes to go. This one's from Lua Attic Simard. He says, oh, hot ends, how do you remove the tiny cartridge screw? The only one that comes from the bottom when the head is stripped. I grease the new ones with lithium, about 3 good blocks I can salvage. Okay, so when you get one stuck, it's usually stuck in there because, and if you strip the head, you might as well just replace the block because they're a pain in the butt to get out. If you can't get in there, then what I would do is just, sometimes I'll use a slightly bigger Allen key, one that's not a full step up or maybe a half step up. Then you can kind of really push on it and get it out of there. But if you can't get it out of there, you're just going to have to replace the block. Okay,
so here's what you guys are going to want to do. You want to go onto AliExpress and you want to buy one of these covers everything screwdriver kits, okay? These are about $15 Canadian. They are super cheap. Now, I don't have any strip screws here, but when I have something like where it's just starting to slip out on the outside, if you will, where it's kind of smooth but not quite there. The first thing I do is I go to the star heads. And sorry, I'm really bad for my terminology today for these there, but the Torx, the ones that have kind of little threaded edges on them, and that gives me just a little bit of extra grip sometimes on these ones to twist them out. Now with hot ends, because chances are it's stripped because it probably had melted plastic around it. So what I usually like to do is I heat it up. If you can hook up to a printer and heat it up, great. If not, take a blowtorch to it, get it nice and hot, and then go in with your screwdriver while it's still hot and see if it'll start loosening up while that plastic underneath it is molten. Now, if the Torx doesn't work, then I go to a flathead, and I make sure I have a good quality flathead bit that I can angle it across the two largest points and try to torque it out. If that doesn't work, you can get those screw remover kits and stuff on Amazon, but usually it's too big for that. At that point, I would say, forget it. Just go get a new block, because just getting a new block is cheap enough. And most people don't realize you don't have to buy the whole V6 kit. If your block breaks, you can buy a new block for about $10. So, and thermistors and heat cartridges are cheaper than sin too. So just go and get a new set of those if you can't get it after those steps.
Just want to follow up here on Snapshot's second question, or second part to his question. He says, in regards to tuning, aside from bed leveling, what are the first 3 or 4 most important things to tune? I have done E-steps and flow rate and Z offset. Then you've covered it.
You should be good.
Yeah, you should be good. Those are exactly what I would tune. If I was building your printer, I would make sure that that's all tuned first before I hand the printer over to you. So yeah, that's you've got it. You've answered your own question. You've done it.
Yeah, the only thing I would say past that is now you're looking into slicer settings. So your optimizations for your print would be slicer. That's why we'd still tell everyone to go to Michael Teaching Tech's GitHub site for calibration and print his cube. Because if his cube's coming out perfect and yours isn't, then you know it's a slicer issue.
All right. With that said, thank you guys very much for joining us. Thank you to all of our members. We hit 40 members this week. I do appreciate that. Because that revenue goes right back into the channel to get things for the channel that we need, and to help you guys get the most out of your 3D printing. So I want to thank Brian, who's over there. I want to thank Jerry, who's over there. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. And we're going to see you again, hopefully this week, with a brand new episode. I don't guarantee that we're going to have a Tuesday tip, but we do need to have a live stream with our members, and we're going to be doing that probably next week before I jet off to Victoria at the end of, is it next week I'm going? Or is it the week after? The week after. I'm going at the end of next week.
I will be buying some wine.
Oh.
So my wife's going to be alone for about 4 or 5 days, but I will be out in Victoria and doing a video grand opening for Matter 3D. So until we see you guys next time, remember that the first layer is always your foundation to a great print, and we will see you again next week, always for our Ask for Help live stream, and tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Till then, see ya.
Bye.
We're out.
Cool.